Run your thumbnail along that rail. Feel it? The paint's cracking and underneath it the wood is black and soft. You repainted this 2 summers ago, it's already failing again because the paint sealed the moisture in, not out. Homesteaders in the Ozarks solved this 1 gallon, less than a cup of coffee. Stay with me. The first time I drove out to Mountain View, Arkansas, I wasn't looking for a wood finish. I was looking for an old woman named Ruth Callahan, 81 years old, who still lived in the farmhouse her father built in 1938, at the end of a gravel road that turns to mud after 2 days of rain. Her porch posts were original lumber, never replaced, silver gray and weathered on the outside, but when I pressed a pocket knife into the grain, the wood underneath was hard and pale, with no give at all, no rot, no soft spots, 80-some years of Ozark winters and summers, and the wood underneath hadn't moved. She told me she'd never once painted those posts, not once in all that time. Instead, every few summers, whenever she noticed the wood starting to look thirsty, as she put it, she'd wipe them down with something her father had kept in an old glass jug under the porch steps, a dark, sticky liquid that smelled faintly like a campfire and left her hands stained for 2 days afterward. I watched her do it that afternoon. No brush, no gloves, just a folded up rag. She worked it into the grain in slow, even strokes, following the direction of the wood, and within minutes the surface darkened and seemed to pull the liquid straight into itself, like the wood had been waiting for it. I asked her what it was called. She just shrugged and said, "Same as always, same as Daddy used." That was the entire explanation. No brand name, no product label, no trip to a hardware store, just a recipe passed down through one family on one porch for nearly a century. I didn't understand what I was actually looking at until months later when I started digging through university agricultural archives back home. And when I found what I found, you'll understand exactly why what I'm about to show you matters, because this isn't folklore and it isn't a grandmother's superstition. It's documented, it's been tested, and it's been sitting in plain sight the entire time waiting for someone to go looking for it. Subscribe now, because the next thing I found is buried even deeper than this one. Here's what nobody explains to you at the paint counter. Wood is porous and it's alive in a way most people don't think about. It expands and contracts with humidity, swelling in the summer, shrinking in the dry cold of winter, season after season, year after year. Modern paints and polyurethane sealants form a hard, rigid plastic film directly on top of the wood, and that film doesn't move the way the wood underneath it does. So the wood breathes and shifts. The rigid film above it can't keep up, and eventually it cracks at the seams. A technical review of traditional wood coatings confirms exactly what happens next. Once that film cracks, rainwater gets drawn in through the crack, but has no way back out, so it builds up inside the wood until it triggers rot and causes the paint to peel and flake. That's not a design flaw you can blame on a bad batch of paint. That's the entire repaint cycle working exactly the way it's built to work. The average homeowner repaints or reseals exterior wood every 3 to 5 years, sanding, scraping, and recoating each time. Do that math across a 30-year mortgage and you've spent thousands of dollars protecting your wood from a problem the product itself is partly responsible for creating. But here's what the Ozark settlers never did. They never sealed the surface shut. They fed the fibers from within. The liquid is a mixture of raw linseed oil and pine tar, traditionally about equal parts, sometimes with a small amount of natural turpentine added to help it penetrate deeper into the grain. That's it. 2 or 3 ingredients, all of them older than the paint industry itself. Here's why it works. In plain terms, linseed oil is a drying oil. It doesn't sit on the surface, it slowly oxidizes and hardens inside the wood fibers themselves from the inside out. A wood finishing reference confirms this is the whole point of the treatment. Linseed oil doesn't trap moisture the way synthetic coatings do. It lets the wood keep regulating itself naturally, so moisture can still escape, which is exactly what prevents rot and internal damage. Pine tar adds water resistance and a natural resistance to insects and fungus, the same reason it was used to waterproof ship hulls and rope for centuries. Instead of forming a film, the mixture becomes part of the wood. There's no surface layer to crack, peel, or trap moisture underneath, because there's no separate layer at all. When I asked Ruth why her father never painted, she said it plainly: paint fights the wood, this just feeds it. She wasn't wrong. This isn't a coating you reapply because it wore out. It's a coating you occasionally refresh, not because it failed, but because wood keeps drinking it in for years afterward. The math on this gets uncomfortable fast. A gallon of exterior acrylic paint runs you $30 to $60 at most hardware stores, and the manufacturer's own instructions recommend recoating every 3 to 5 years to maintain the warranty. A gallon of raw linseed oil and pine tar mixed at home costs a few dollars in raw materials, and it can go a decade or more between applications. That is not a small difference. Multiply it across every homeowner in the country repainting their fences, siding, and porches on a 3 to 5 year cycle, and you're looking at an entire industry built on a maintenance schedule that a 2 ingredient recipe makes almost entirely unnecessary. It is not a conspiracy, it is worse than that. A conspiracy you can fight because at some point someone has to actively hide something from you, and things that are actively hidden can be exposed. A system you cannot see is harder to fight because nobody is hiding anything. It just feels like the way things are, like repainting your porch every few years, is simply the cost of owning a home. Big box paint aisles are built around repeat purchases, with entire product lines designed to be reapplied on a schedule. Contractors quote jobs based on the materials they stock, know how to apply quickly, and can mark up. None of that makes any single person or company villainous. It's just economics, and economics has no financial incentive to hand you a recipe that costs $3 and lasts a generation, even if it's the better product. Start with the wood itself. Make sure your wood is bare and completely dry. No old paint, no varnish, no polyurethane, nothing already sealed on top of it. If there's old paint on there, you'll need to strip it back to raw wood first because this treatment only works when it can actually soak into the fibers. Mix equal parts raw linseed oil and pine tar in a metal or glass container. Never plastic, since the tar can degrade certain plastics over time. Stir it slowly until it's fully blended into a smooth dark brown liquid, roughly the consistency of thin honey. If it feels too thick to absorb well, add a small splash of natural turpentine to thin it out and help it penetrate deeper. Apply it with an old rag or a cheap natural bristle brush. You genuinely don't need anything fancy here, and a folded rag actually works the mixture into the grain more evenly than a brush does. Work in thin, even coats, always going with the direction of the grain rather than against it. Let the first coat soak in fully, usually a few hours depending on temperature, before deciding whether a second coat is needed. You'll notice the grain darken almost immediately and start to pop, revealing texture you might not have even known was there. That's the wood actually absorbing the oil into itself, not just sitting underneath a film. Total cost under $3 a gallon when mixed at home. Total time under an hour for an average size porch or fence section. Week 1, the wood will look noticeably richer and darker, almost like it's been oiled. By week 4, it will have fully cured to a weathered silver gray patina on the surface, the same look Ruth's porch posts have, while staying completely solid and protected underneath. Months after meeting Ruth, I found what I was looking for in a State Historical Society archive, a box of pre-1945 agricultural extension bulletins, the kind sent to farm families before modern paint was affordable or widely available. Inside was a bulletin on fence post and structural timber preservation, written for rural farm families, describing a linseed oil and tar treatment for wood exposed to weather and ground contact. It described the exact ratio Ruth's father used, and it explained why the treatment outperformed early whitewash and oil paints of the era for outdoor timber. I held that bulletin in my hands and thought about Ruth's porch posts. 80 plus years old, never painted, still solid. This wasn't folk superstition passed down by accident. It was documented, tested advice that farm families relied on, decades before synthetic sealants existed, and it quietly disappeared from common knowledge as paint became cheap, mass-produced, and marketed as the modern standard. That's what this document proves. The old-fashioned method wasn't a workaround people used because they lacked better options. For exterior structural wood, it was in many respects the better option, and it got replaced not because it stopped working, but because it stopped being profitable to sell. You might be wondering if it smells, and yes, freshly applied, it has a noticeable campfire-like scent from the pine tar, stronger on a warm day than a cool one. That scent fades within 1 to 2 weeks as the oil cures and the wood settles, and most people I've talked to end up not minding it at all, since it smells like wood smoke rather than anything chemical. You might think your situation is different. Maybe your fence or siding already has old paint on it. That's fine, and it's actually the most common starting point. Strip it back to bare wood first using a scraper or a heat gun, and the treatment works exactly the same on stripped, previously painted timber as it does on wood that was never painted at all. And if someone in your life, a contractor, a spouse, a neighbor leaning on your fence line, tells you it won't hold up compared to modern paint, ask them how many times they've personally repainted their own home in the last 10 years. This isn't a new, untested product someone's trying to sell you. It's a treatment with decades of documented use on real structures that are still standing, weathered but solid today. If you're still not convinced, here's the one thing I'd ask you to try first. Treat a single fence post or just one porch rail and leave the rest untouched. Give it a full season through at least one hard freeze and one wet spring. Compare it side by side to the painted wood next to it. The difference in how the grain looks, feels, and holds up will tell you everything the paint aisle never will. You didn't lose this knowledge. It was priced out, painted over, and quietly replaced, one product launch at a time, one generation at a time, until nobody left alive remembered there was ever another way of doing it. There's a group of people out there, a lot of them our age, standing in their own backyards, looking at their own fences and porches, who are done being sold a maintenance cycle for a problem that a $3 recipe already solved for their great-grandparents 100 years ago. If you tried this yourself, or if your own grandparents or great-grandparents used something similar on their property, tell me about it in the comments below. I read every single one, and some of the best archive leads I've ever chased down started as a comment on a video exactly like this one. There's a lot more sitting in these archives than most people realize. Root cellars that never needed power, pantry methods that outlasted anything modern, ways of building that quietly disappeared once they stopped being profitable to teach. If that's the kind of thing you want to keep finding, subscribe and it'll be waiting for you. Stay curious about what got left behind.